No one wanted to take care of the paralyzed billionaire until a poor delivery man appeared. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our story. Before we continue, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in New York, Jamaica, maybe South Africa, or Canada? We'd love to hear from you. When the job offered double pay to care for a difficult patient, 30 people showed up at the tall iron gate on Emerald Hill. And one by one, every single one of them ran away. Some lasted an hour, some lasted a full day. A few brave ones made it to the second morning before they packed their bags and never came back. The woman inside that beautiful mansion had a tongue sharper than any knife, and she knew exactly how to use it. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, the same afternoon, the 12th caregiver stormed out of the front door that Ethan Carter pulled his old delivery van up to the gate. He wasn't there for a job. Yeah, he was just there to drop off a lunch order. Someone inside had ordered jollof rice and grilled chicken from a restaurant across town, and Swift Run Delivery had sent Ethan to bring it. He parked, grabbed the brown paper bag from the passenger seat, and walked toward the gate. That's when he saw the man coming out, a big, broad-shouldered fellow in a white caregiver uniform, walking fast, shaking his head from side to side like he had just seen something he could never unsee. And Ethan stepped aside to let him pass. The man didn't even look at him. He walked straight to the security guard at the gate post and said loudly and clearly, "That's 12 people this week." "Well, nobody in this entire city can work with that woman. I don't care how much they're paying, it's not worth it." The security guard, a thin older man who looked like he had heard this many times before, just nodded slowly and pressed a button to let the caregiver out. Ethan stood there with the paper bag in his hand. 12 people, he thought. In 1 week, he pressed the intercom button and waited. The woman who came to the gate was around 60 years old with tired eyes and a kind face. She opened the small side gate and took the food bag from Ethan's hands. "Thank you," she said quietly, already turning to go back in. "Excuse me, ma'am," Ethan said. She stopped and looked at him. That man who just walked out, or was he here for a job? The woman let out a long breath, the kind that carries a whole week of exhaustion inside it. "Yes," she said. "He was the 12th caregiver to leave this week, and the 23rd this month." Ethan blinked. 23rd. She nodded. "I'm Patricia. I've been the housekeeper here for 16 years, and I'm telling you, young man, I have never seen anything like this in my life. Not even close." "What does the patient need?" Ethan asked. Patricia looked at him for a moment, studying his face. His simple clothes, his old van parked by the roadside. "Everything," she said finally. "Miss Adams can't use her legs at all since the accident. She needs help with eating, bathing, getting dressed, taking her medicine. Her arms are weak on some days. She needs someone around her almost all the time, and she's difficult." Patricia gave a short, sad laugh. "Difficult is not the word, son." She screams. She says the most hurtful things you can imagine. She throws things, for she accuses people of staring at her. She fires people in the middle of helping her. She is. Patricia paused and looked toward the house. When she turned back, her voice was softer. She was not always like this. Before the accident, she was demanding, "Yes, but she was fair. She was strong. She was someone you respected." Now she shook her head. The accident changed her. Losing her fiancé in that crash changed her. She came back from the hospital a different person. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What's the pay?" he asked. Patricia told him. Ethan did the math in his head in about 3 seconds flat. It was more than 3 months of delivery earnings for 1 month of work. He thanked Patricia, walked back to his van, and drove away. But he couldn't stop thinking. That night, Ethan sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment in Kingsway with his mother, Victoria Carter. And she was 65 years old with gray hair and kind eyes, and she had been managing diabetes for the past 8 years. Most days she was fine, but lately, Fine had stopped being enough. Ethan opened the envelope from the pharmacy that had been sitting on the table since morning. He already knew what was inside. He had been putting off reading it all day. The price of his mother's insulin had gone up again. The new monthly cost stared back at him from the page like a problem that had no solution. Now he put the letter face down on the table. Ethan. His mother's voice was gentle. I saw that letter. Mom, how bad is it? He was quiet. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her fingers were warm. Tell me. Ethan looked at his hands. He was 35 years old and had been working since he was 19, first at a factory, then driving delivery trucks, then on a motorcycle, and now in this old van that needed new brakes every 3 months. But he had never once complained to his mother about how hard things were. He didn't see the point in it. But tonight, the numbers were just too big to hide. The insulin went up again, he said, and Olivia's next semester fees are due in 6 weeks. And the van, if the brakes give out, I lose the job. I can't do all 3 at the same time, Mom. Not with what I'm making. His younger sister, Olivia, 20 years old, studying business administration at the Polytechnic on the other side of the city, poked her head out from the living room where she had been doing homework on the small fold-up table they kept there. She had heard. He could tell from her face. Jake, Olivia said quietly, I can take a semester off. I can. No, Ethan said firmly. You're not taking a semester off. But Olivia, he looked at her steadily. You're not taking time off. That's not happening. Olivia looked at him for a moment, then went back to her books without another word. She knew that tone. And when Ethan said something in that voice, it was decided. His mother squeezed his hand. God will open a door, Ethan. He always does. Ethan nodded and smiled at her. The small, quiet smile he used when he didn't want her to see that he was worried. That night, lying on his mattress in the dark, he stared at the ceiling and thought about a glass mansion on a hill, and a woman who had sent away 23 caregivers in 1 month and about double pay. He thought about it for a very long time. And the next morning, before sunrise, Ethan got up, splashed cold water on his face, put on his cleanest shirt, and drove back to Emerald Hill. Patricia recognized him the moment she saw him at the gate. Her eyebrows went up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. The delivery driver from yesterday, she said. What are you doing here at 6 o'clock in the morning? I'd like to apply for the caregiver position, Ethan said. Patricia stared at him. Then she stared at him some more. Son, she said slowly. Did you hear anything I told you yesterday? Yes, ma'am, every word. 12 people this week alone. I know, trained nurses, people with certificates and years of experience. They didn't last. I know that too. Patricia put her hands on her hips and looked at him the way a grandmother looks at a child who has just said something both foolish and brave at the same time. You have no medical training. I've been caring for my diabetic mother for 4 years. Ethan said. I manage her insulin schedule, her meals, her doctor visits. I know how to be patient. I don't give up easily. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. She looked at him, really looked at him. His clothes were simple and a little worn at the edges. His van behind him was old and had a small dent on the passenger side, but his eyes were steady. Come. Like a man who had already considered every reason to walk away and decided to stay anyway. She let out a breath. Wait here, she said. She walked back through the wide front door of the mansion. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor as she climbed the staircase to the 2nd floor and knocked on the heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Miss Adams, she called softly. There's a young man at the gate. He's asking about the caregiver position. Pos. Then a voice, cool and sharp as glass, came through the door. Another one? Fine. Send him up. Let's see how long this one takes to run. Patricia came back downstairs and opened the gate and let Ethan through. As they walked up the long driveway together, she leaned close and whispered, I want you to know that I'm rooting for you, but please be very careful with what you say in there. She looks for reasons to attack. Don't give her any. Ethan nodded. The inside of the mansion was exactly as he had imagined. Marble floors so shiny you could see yourself in them. Plus a chandelier above the entrance hall that looked like it cost more than his entire apartment building. Paintings in golden frames on every wall. A staircase with a deep red carpet running down the center. But Patricia was right about one thing. It was cold in here. Not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning. A different kind. The kind that comes from a house where people are too afraid to talk above a whisper. They climbed the staircase in silence. At the top, a long hallway stretched before them, and at the very end of it was a closed door. Ellen knocked. "She'll see you," she said. She gave Ethan one last look, part warning, part prayer, and then quickly walked back toward the stairs. Ethan was alone. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was enormous. An entire wall of glass windows looked out over the city. The morning light came in clean in gold, falling across a king-sized bed. Rows of bookshelves packed with thick business books and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat in comfortably. And there, in the center of the room, sat Michelle Adams. She had her back to him, her wheelchair facing the window. Her hair was silver black, pulled tightly back from her face. She wore a silk robe over her shoulders, but it hung loose on her thin frame. Outside the window, the city was just waking up. Tiny cars and tiny people moving far below like ants. "Mike, close the door," she said without turning around. Ethan closed it gently. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, she turned her wheelchair to face him. Ethan saw a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to look right through him. Her face was thin and pale. Her mouth was set in a hard line. But what struck him most was the sadness hidden deep in those eyes, a sadness she was trying very hard to cover with anger. "So," Michelle said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "You're the brave soul who thinks he can take care of me." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said simply. She looked him up and down like she was inspecting a broken piece of furniture. "What's your name?" "Ethan Carter." "Ma'am, and what makes you think you're qualified for this job, Ethan Carter? I see no medical uniform, no nursing badge. You look like you just walked off a construction site." "I'm a delivery driver, ma'am," Ethan said honestly. "I deliver food and packages around the city." Michael's eyebrows shot up. And then she laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was harsh and mocking. "A delivery driver?" "Patricia sent me a delivery driver." She shook her head. "This is a new low, even for the desperate parade of fools who've walked through that door." Ethan didn't flinch. He stood still and looked directly at her. "I may not be a trained nurse," he said calmly, "but I've been taking care of my mother for 4 years. She has diabetes. I help her with her medicine, her meals, her insulin shots. I make sure she's comfortable. I'm patient. I'm responsible. And I don't give up easily." Michelle studied him with narrowed eyes. "Your mother is lucky to have such a devoted son, but I am not your mother. I don't need your pity or your Boy Scout routine." "I'm not offering pity, ma'am," Ethan said. "I'm offering help, that's all." "Help?" Michelle's voice rose. "You think I need help from someone like you? Look at this house. Look at everything I've built. I ran a construction company worth millions of dollars. I had 500 employees. I designed buildings all over this state, and now I'm supposed to let some delivery boy take care of me." Her words were meant to hurt him, to make him feel small. Ethan could see that. He could also see the pain behind them. "You're right," Ethan said softly. "You did build something amazing. Patricia told me about your company. You were one of the most successful businesswomen in the whole state." Michelle blinked, more surprised. She had expected him to argue or defend himself. Instead, he had agreed with her. "But ma'am," Ethan continued, Success isn't about what you used to be. It's about who you are right now today. And right now, you need someone to help you. There's no shame in that. Michelle's face turned red with anger. How dare you lecture me? You know nothing about my life, nothing about what I've lost. You're right, Ethan said again, his voice still calm. I don't know what you've been through, but I do know what it's like to lose something important. I lost my job 4 years ago. I lost my father when I was 20. My mother lost her health. My sister almost had to quit college because we couldn't afford it. Life takes things from all of us, ma'am. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Michelle stared at him, speechless. No one had ever talked to her like this before. The other caregivers had either cowered in fear or argued back with anger. But this man, he was different. He wasn't afraid of her. But he wasn't disrespectful either. He was just honest. Get out, Michelle finally said, but her voice was quieter now. Ma'am, I said get out, she shouted. You're dismissed. Go back to delivering your little packages and leave me alone. Ethan didn't move. Ma'am, I came here because I need this job. My family is counting on me. But I also came because I think I can actually help you. Not because I pity you. Not because I think you're weak. But because everybody needs help sometimes. Even people who used to run million-dollar companies. Michelle's hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair so tight her knuckles turned white. If you don't leave right now, she said through clenched teeth, I will call security and have you thrown out. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He walked over and placed it on the table next to her wheelchair. That's my phone number, he said. If you change your mind, call me. I'll be waiting. Then he turned and walked toward the door. You're a fool, Michelle called after him. Just like all the others, Ethan paused at the door and looked back at her. Maybe, he said with a small smile. But at least I'm a fool who doesn't run away. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Michelle sat alone in her room, staring at the piece of paper on the table. Her heart was beating fast. Her hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from something else. It's something she hadn't felt in a very long time. No one had ever stood up to her like that. No one had ever looked at her with such honest eyes and refused to be scared away. She reached for the paper and crumpled it in her fist. Fool, she whispered again, but she didn't throw the paper away. Downstairs. Patricia was waiting by the front door with a sad expression. That was fast, she said when Ethan appeared. I'm sorry, son. I knew it was a long shot. It's okay, Ethan said. Hey, thank you for giving me a chance. He walked out to his van, got in, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. He had really hoped this would work. The double pay would have solved so many problems. But as he drove away, something told him this wasn't over yet. He had driven about 10 minutes away from Emerald Hill when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number at first. It was a long number, the kind that comes from a private line. He almost let it ring out, but some small, quiet feeling in his chest, made him pull the van over to the side of the road and pick up. Hello? Silence on the other end. For 3 full seconds, nothing. Then a voice, sure, control, but with something underneath it that sounded almost like effort, like it was taking everything this person had just to make this one phone call. This is Michelle Adams. Ethan sat up straight. You left your number, she said. I'm not calling because I've changed my mind. I want to make that very clear. Oh, I still think this is a terrible idea, and you are almost certainly going to fail. Ethan said nothing. He waited. But Patricia is 60 years old and she has bad knees, and the agency has apparently blacklisted my address, and I have a doctor's appointment on Thursday that no one can take me to boss, so you can come on a trial basis 3 days. If you survive 3 days without doing something idiotic, we will talk about what happens next. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, Ethan said. Don't be late, she said. And then she hung up. Ethan held the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he let out a slow breath and looked out through the windshield at the road ahead. 3 days. He could do 3 days. He turned the van around and drove back toward King's Way to pack a bag. He told his mother that evening while she was eating the small, careful dinner she always had. Brown rice, steamed vegetables, no salt, the kind of meal that kept her blood sugar steady. That he sat across from her and explained the situation as simply as he could. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he was done, she put down her fork. How long will you be gone? She asked. 3 days to start, he said. Maybe longer if it works out. And your deliveries? I already called the depot. Tommy said he can cover my route for a week. After that, we'll figure it out. His mother was quiet for a moment, turning her spoon slowly in her fingers. This woman, she said, she sounds very broken. She is, Ethan said. Broken people can be dangerous, his mother said gently. They don't always know they're hurting others. I know, Mom, but they can also be saved, she added. If someone is patient enough, she looked at him steadily across the table. And Ethan understood that she wasn't just talking about Michelle Adams anymore. She was talking about him, too, about all the times he had been tired and worn down and barely holding on, and someone had been patient with him. She had been patient with him. I'll be fine, he said. She nodded once. I know you will. She picked up her fork again. Olivia left your sister's emergency contact list on the counter, and don't forget your insulin kit for me. Take the small blue cooler bag, not the big one. Ethan almost smiled. Even in a moment like this, his mother was practical. It was one of the things he loved most about her. He packed that night quietly and carefully the way he did everything. Clean clothes. His phone charger, the small blue cooler bag with his mother's emergency insulin kit. Though Patricia had promised there was a proper fridge in the staff quarters, his paperback book, a small framed photo of his mother and Olivia that he kept on his bedside table and had never once traveled without. He zipped the bag. He looked around his small room. Then he picked up his bag and got ready to face whatever was waiting for him on Emerald Hill. But he arrived at 7 o'clock the next morning, just as the city was fully waking up. The security guard at the gate, the same thin, older man from before, looked at him for a moment, then at a list on his clipboard, then back at him. Ethan Carter, he said. Yes. The man pressed the button without another word. The gate swung open. Patricia was waiting for him at the front door. She looked genuinely relieved to see him, which told Ethan everything he needed to know about how bad the previous days had been. She's already awake, Patricia said, keeping her voice low as she walked him through the entrance hall. She woke up at 5 o'clock. She's been sitting by the window since then. She hasn't eaten breakfast. Does she usually eat breakfast? Ethan asked. She used to. Now she pushes the tray away most mornings. Says she's not hungry. But Patricia glanced at him. She's always hungry. She just doesn't like asking for things. She used to be the person everyone asked. Now she's on the other side and she hates it. Ethan filed that away quietly. Patricia showed him to a small but clean room on the ground floor just past the kitchen. A staff room with a single bed, a window overlooking the side garden, a wardrobe, and its own bathroom. Simple, tidy. He put his bag down and looked around. This is yours while you're here, Patricia said. Meals are available from the kitchen at any time. The main thing to know about the schedule is this. Miss Adams takes her medication at 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 at night. She has physical therapy twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays at 10 o'clock, and a doctor's appointment this Thursday at noon. She likes the television off before 9 o'clock in the evening, and she cannot stand the smell of any strong perfume or cologne. I don't wear any, Ethan said. Now Patricia looked at him as if this was the best news she'd heard all week. Good. The last caregiver used a deodorant spray that she said smelled like a factory producing cheap decisions. Those were her exact words. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll go up and introduce myself properly. Patricia put a gentle hand on his arm. Wait, she said. Let me bring her breakfast first. Give her something in her stomach. She's always worse when she's hungry, though she'd never admit that in a million years. Ethan waited in the kitchen while Patricia prepared a breakfast tray, soft scrambled eggs, sliced fruit, a cup of black tea with no sugar, and a small glass of orange juice. Everything was arranged neatly, the plate warmed, the napkin folded into a clean triangle. Patricia carried it upstairs. Ethan heard the knock, then the muffled sound of Michelle's voice, and though he couldn't hear the words clearly, the sharp tone carried all the way down the staircase. A few minutes later, Patricia came back down. The tray was still full. She refused it. Ethan asked. Patricia set the tray on the kitchen counter and rubbed her forehead. She said the eggs smelled overcooked. They weren't. But that's not really the point. Ethan looked at the tray. He looked at the eggs. He thought for a moment. Can I try? He asked. Patricia looked at him, then at the tray, then back at him. Son, she said carefully. The last person who tried to bring her food back after she refused it got a glass of orange juice thrown at their shirt. Okay, Ethan said. You picked up the tray. Do you have an apron? Patricia blinked. Then slowly she went to a drawer and handed him a plain white apron. He tied it around himself, picked up the tray again, and walked toward the staircase. He knocked on the door the same way Patricia had. 2 quiet knocks, nothing demanding. I said I wasn't hungry. Michelle called from inside. I know, ma'am, Ethan said through the door, Patricia told me. I just thought I'd leave the tray outside your door in case you change your mind. You don't have to eat it, but it'll be here. Silence. He set the tray carefully on the small table that stood in the hallway just beside her door. He had noticed it on his first visit, a little side table that had probably never been used for anything, and he straightened everything on the train neatly. Then he walked back toward the staircase. He had made it about halfway down when he heard the door open. He didn't stop walking. He didn't look back. He went to the kitchen, sat down at the small staff table, and helped himself to a cup of tea. 15 minutes later, Patricia came into the kitchen with wide eyes. The tray is empty, she whispered. Ethan nodded and said nothing. He took a sip of his tea. Patricia sat down across from him. She looked at him for a long moment with an expression that was somewhere between amazement and relief. Where did you come from? She said quietly, not rudely, almost like she was asking the air itself. Ethan just smiled into his cup. At 8 o'clock, he went upstairs with her morning medication, a small tray with 2 tablets and a glass of water, exactly as Patricia had shown him. He knocked. This time, the door opened almost immediately. Michelle was by the window in her wheelchair, and the empty breakfast tray pushed to one side of the room. She didn't look at him when he came in. She kept her eyes on the city below. Ethan walked over, set the medication tray on the table beside her, and stepped back to a respectful distance. Your 8 o'clock medication, ma'am, he said simply. She looked at the tray. Then she picked up the tablets one at a time and took them with the water. She set the glass down. Still didn't look at him. The eggs were cold, she said. I'll make a note of that, Ethan said. I prefer them soft, not rubbery. Understood. Pause. The orange juice was too sweet. I'll let the kitchen know. Another pause. Outside the window, a bird passed by, a swift cutting through the morning air in a clean, straight line. You're not taking notes, Michelle said. She was watching him now from the corner of her eye. Ethan tapped his temple. I remember things, he said. She looked at him fully then, just for a second, and there was something in her expression that he couldn't quite name. It wasn't warmth. It was more like she was recalculating something, like a number she had expected to come out one way had come out differently, and she was deciding what to do with that. "You can go," she said, turning back to the window. Ethan picked up the empty medication tray and walked toward the door. "Carter," she said. He stopped. "The tray in the hall," she said. "That was a trick." "No, ma'am," he said. And that was just a tray in the hall. He left before she could respond. The first day passed without anything being thrown. Ethan took this as a success. He kept to a routine quietly and without fuss. The way he used to run his delivery schedule, medication at the right time. Meals adjusted based on what Patricia told him she actually liked versus what she said she wanted. He learned quickly that Michelle Adams communicated in a kind of code. What she rejected was often what she wanted most. And what she criticized most sharply was usually the thing she had been secretly hoping someone would notice. When she said the room was too bright, she didn't mean she wanted the curtains fully drawn. She meant she was getting a headache and needed the blinds tilted, not closed. He figured that out by watching her squint, and then watching where she kept almost looking at the small lever on the blinds that she couldn't reach from her wheelchair. He adjusted the blinds without being asked, without making it a moment. You just did it and moved on. She said nothing. But that afternoon, when he brought her afternoon tea, she had moved her wheelchair slightly, just slightly, away from the harsh angle of the light, like someone who had gotten comfortable. The second day, she tested him properly. He had been expecting it. Patricia had warned him in a whisper over breakfast that morning. She always waits for the second day. The first day she observes. The second day she attacks. It started at 9 o'clock in the morning. He came in to help her with her morning routine, the part he had been most careful about, because it required helping her with things that were deeply personal. And he had read enough about caring for people with mobility difficulties to know that dignity mattered more than almost anything else. He always knocked. He always told her what he was going to do before he did it. He never rushed. He never made her feel like a task on a checklist. But on the second morning, she was in a different kind of mood entirely. The moment he came through the door, she was already speaking. "You positioned the wheelchair incorrectly last night," she said. Her voice was clipped and cold. "I specifically said I wanted it facing the east window in the evening, not the south window. Are you incapable of following simple directions?" Ethan thought back. He had positioned the wheelchair facing the window that caught the last of the evening light, and the south window. He had done it because when he had glanced in the previous evening, she had been watching the sunset and her face just for a moment had looked almost peaceful. He had not been told which window. Not specifically, but he didn't say that. "I'll remember east in the evenings," he said. "I apologize for the confusion." "Confusion?" she repeated, her voice rising. "It's not confusion. It's carelessness. I live in this wheelchair. This is my world now. This chair, this room, these windows. And I can't even rely on the people supposed to be helping me to get the most basic things right." Ethan said nothing. He began preparing the space for her morning routine, moving efficiently and quietly. "Are you listening to me?" she snapped. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Then why aren't you responding?" "Because you're right," he said simply. "And I don't think arguing with something that's right is a good use of either of our time." She went quiet. He continued with his preparations. He heard her exhale behind him, a sharp, almost frustrated breath, like someone who had loaded a gun and found the target had moved. "You're very strange," she said finally. "I've been told," Ethan said. The others argued back, she said. Or they cried. Or they went silent in that pathetic way people go silent when they're about to quit. "I'm not going to quit, ma'am. You don't know that." "I do, actually," Ethan said, turning to face her. He looked at her steadily. I made a decision when I walked back through that gate this morning. I'm seeing this through, whatever that looks like." Michelle Adams stared at him. Something moved across her face, something complicated and quick that she covered almost immediately with her usual mask of cold authority. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said quietly. "I don't," Ethan replied. The third day arrived the way difficult things often do. Quietly, without warning, they wrapped inside what looked like an ordinary morning. Ethan was up before 6. He had slept lightly, the way he always did in unfamiliar places, one ear half open to the sounds of the house. He had learned the sounds of the mansion by now, the gentle hum of the air system, the way the floorboards on the second landing creaked at the third step, the distant sound of the city that floated up from below like a soft murmur. He got dressed, checked his phone, on a message from Olivia saying their mother had slept well and taken her morning insulin without any problems, and went to the kitchen to help Patricia with breakfast. Patricia was already there, moving around the kitchen with the slow, careful rhythm of someone whose knees hurt, but who refused to say so. She looked up when Ethan came in. "You made it to day 3, she said. There was genuine warmth in her voice. "Still standing," Ethan said. Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that had some sadness in it. "The record before you was 4 days. A woman named Patricia, 19 years of nursing experience." She shook her head. Miss Adams told her that her hands smelled like hospital soap and that looking at her face was making the room feel smaller. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What did Patricia do?" "She left a very polite note in the kitchen," Patricia said, and never came back. Ethan nodded slowly. He began slicing bread the way Patricia had showed him. A thin even cuts the crust left on because Michelle had once said removing crust was something done for children and she was not a child. He thought about Patricia. He thought about all 23 of them, the nurses, the caregivers, the experienced professionals who had walked through that front door full of good intentions and walked back out empty-handed. He didn't judge any of them. He understood. And there was a particular kind of exhaustion that came from being attacked by someone you were trying to help. It wore you down in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It got into a quieter place, into your sense of yourself, your belief that what you were doing mattered. The only reason it hadn't worn Ethan down yet was something he had figured out on the very first day. Michelle Adams wasn't attacking him. She was attacking her situation. But he just happened to be standing in the room. Once he understood that, everything she said landed differently. The sharp words, the impossible standards, the constant testing. None of it was really about him. It was about a woman who had spent her entire adult life being in complete control of everything around her, and who had woken up one day to find that control was gone. Not reduced, not limited, gone. And the only tool she had left that still worked perfectly, her mind, her voice, her will, she was using like a shield. Ethan understood shields. He had carried his own for years. It was just quieter. He brought her breakfast at 7:30. She was already dressed. He had helped her with that an hour earlier. The same careful routine, the same respectful distance, the same calm explanations of each step before he took it. She had been quieter than usual during the process. Not softer exactly, just quieter like a storm that was gathering rather than one that was passing. He set the tray down. Eggs soft this time. He had stood over the pan himself and timed it carefully. Fresh orange juice diluted slightly with water the way Patricia had suggested after day 1. Toast, thin crust on a small pot of tea. She looked at the tray. She looked at the eggs. She didn't say anything about them. She picked up her fork. Ethan took that as a victory and went to stand by the window at a respectful distance, ready to help if she needed anything, invisible if she didn't. And they stayed like that in silence for a few minutes. Her eating, him standing, the city moving below them in the morning light. It was the most peaceful the room had felt since he arrived. Then her fork stopped. "Sit down," she said. Ethan looked at her. There's a chair behind you, she said, not looking up from her plate. Sit in it. You hovering over there like a lamppost is making me anxious. You sat down. She continued eating. Another minute passed. How old are you? She asked. 35. Ma'am. And you've been a delivery driver for how long? About 6 years, different jobs before that? What kind of jobs? Factory work, construction, a print shop for 2 years? She was quiet for a moment, and none of those paid enough. It wasn't a question. It was the observation of someone who had spent her career understanding how money moved and where it didn't. They paid, Ethan said. Just not enough for everything. For your mother's medication, among other things. Now Michelle set her fork down and looked at him directly for the first time that morning. Patricia told me about your mother. She said, I didn't ask her to. She volunteered it. I want you to know I don't make a habit of investigating the personal lives of people who work for me. I know, Ethan said. I'm telling you because she stopped. She looked back at her plate. Because I want you to know that I'm aware you didn't take this job out of some noble desire to help me. You took it because you needed money. And I respect that more than I would respect someone who came here claiming to care about my well-being. Ethan considered that for a moment. Both things can be true at the same time, he said. She looked at him again. What do you mean? I mean, I need the money, he said. And I also want to help you. Those aren't opposites. Michelle studied him the way she might study a contract she wasn't sure whether to sign. Most people, she said slowly. When they look at me now, when they look at this. She gestured briefly toward her wheelchair. A quick, almost angry motion. They see something to be pitted or something to be managed. Like I've become a problem to be solved rather than a person to be spoken to. I know, Ethan said. And you don't see it that way? No, ma'am. Why not? Ethan thought about it honestly before he answered. Because I've spent 6 years delivering things to people in houses like this one, he said. And the thing I've noticed is that a big house doesn't mean a person has everything they need. It just means they have a big house. Michelle was very still. Then slowly something happened to her face. It wasn't a smile, not quite. But the hard line of her mouth softened just a fraction, just for a second, like a door that had been locked for a very long time, moving the tiniest bit on its hinges. She picked up her fork and finished her eggs. The attack, when it came, arrived that afternoon. Ethan had been helping her move from her wheelchair to the specialized chair in the therapy room on the ground floor. A room that had been set up by her medical team with equipment for the gentle daily stretches her physiotherapist had prescribed. The transfer required care and coordination, and Ethan had practiced the technique Patricia had shown him until he was confident in it. He was in the middle of the transfer, his hands placed correctly, his stance stable when she suddenly snapped. You're holding my arm wrong. I'm holding it the way Dr. Anderson showed. I don't care what Dr. Anderson showed you. I'm telling you it's wrong. You're gripping too tight. You think I'm made of glass? Or are you trying to make sure I can't get away? Ethan adjusted his grip immediately, loosening it without letting go. Better, he asked. No, she said. The whole thing is wrong. Start again. They started again. Halfway through the second attempt, she spoke again. And this time, her voice had that particular edge to it, the one that wasn't about grip or position or any practical thing at all. You know what the last nurse said to me before she left? Michelle said. She said I was the most ungrateful person she had ever met in her life. She said she felt sorry for me. Her voice was sharp, tight. Can you imagine feeling sorry for me? Ethan completed the transfer carefully, making sure she was safely settled before he responded. People say things when they're hurt, he said. She wasn't hurt, Michelle said fiercely. I barely spoke to her. You spoke to her enough that she cried in the kitchen, Ethan said quietly. Michael went very still. Ethan hadn't planned to say it, but it was the truth. And he had learned from his mother from years of dealing with difficult situations on delivery routes, from simply being alive long enough that sometimes the truth said gently and without cruelty was the only thing that could cut through the noise. "Patricia told you that," Michelle said. Her voice was flat. "Yes," Ethan said. "Patricia talks too much. Patricia loves you," Ethan said simply. "She's been here 16 years. People don't stay in a hard place for 16 years unless they love something about it." The silence that followed was different from the silences before it. Heavier, fuller, like the silence just before rain. Mikkel turned her face away. She looked at the wall, had a small framed certificate hanging there, partially hidden behind a curtain, as if someone had tried to tuck it out of sight. Ethan had noticed it on his first day, but said nothing. He could read part of it from where he stood. In recognition of outstanding contribution to urban development. "You should start the stretches," Michelle said finally. Her voice was quieter now. "That's what this room is for." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said, and he did carefully, correctly, without another word about nurses or crying or 16 years of loyalty. But something had shifted in the room. Something small and fragile and important. And both of them knew it. That evening, Ethan sat in his small room off the kitchen and called his mother. She picked up on the second ring the way she always did, as if she had been expecting him. Maybe she had. "How are you?" she asked. "Good," he said. "How's the blood sugar today?" "Behaving itself," she said. "Olivia made dinner. Rice and stew. Very good. Tell her I said so. She wants to know if you're eating properly." Ethan looked at the plate Patricia had sent down to his room earlier. A generous portion of chicken and vegetables still warm under a cloth cover. "Better than at home," he admitted. His mother laughed softly. "Good. Now tell me the real answer. How are you, really?" He leaned back against the headboard. Through the window, the garden was dark and still, lit faintly by the security lights. Somewhere above him, on the second floor, Mikkel Adams was probably sitting by her window looking out at the same darkness. "She's not what people think she is," Ethan said. "Oh," his mother said. "She's angry," he said. "But it's not really anger. He searched for the right word. It's grief. She lost someone she loved. She lost the use of her legs. She lost the version of herself that she spent 40 years building. And she doesn't know how to be this new version yet. So she just fights everything. Everyone." His mother was quiet for a moment. "That sounds very lonely," she said. "It is." Ethan said another silence. Then his mother said, "Ethan, you have a good heart. You always have. Just don't let it carry more than it can hold." "I know, Mom. I mean it." "I know," he said again more softly. After they hung up, he sat in the quiet room for a while. He thought about what his mother said. He thought about Michelle at that window. He thought about 23 caregivers who had left, and the nurses before them, and the way Patricia's voice got careful and soft whenever she talked about who Michelle used to be. He thought about the crumpled piece of paper with his phone number on it, the paper she hadn't thrown away. He picked up his book. He read 3 pages. Then he put it down because he couldn't concentrate. Tomorrow would be day 4, the day nobody else had reached. He turned off the light. Day 4 arrived with rain, and not the light, polite kind that passes quickly and leaves everything smelling clean. This was a heavy, serious rain, the kind that settles into a city like it owns the place. It pressed against the mansion's tall glass walls and turned the garden into a dark, wet blur. And it made the whole house feel quieter and closer than usual. Ethan was up at 5:30. He checked his phone. Olivia had sent a message at midnight. Their mother had slept well and taken her evening insulin without any problems. He read it twice, let it settle, then got up and went to help Patricia with breakfast. He brought Michelle her tray at 7:30. Eggs done soft, juice slightly diluted, toast with the crusts on. He set it down, said good morning, and left without waiting to be dismissed. At 9 o'clock, he went back to collect the tray. It was completely untouched. Every single thing exactly as he had arranged it. Not a sip taken, not a single bite. Michelle was at the window in her wheelchair, her back to the room. So watching rain fall over the city, she didn't acknowledge him. He picked up the tray and left without a word. Downstairs, Patricia saw his face immediately. "Untouched," she said. "All of it," Ethan said. Patricia sighed the way someone sighs when they've been worrying about the same thing for a very long time. This happens on gray days. She just disappears inside herself. "I've tried everything. Nothing works when she gets like this." Ethan stood looking at the untouched food for a moment. And then he took a single orange from the bowl on the counter and went back upstairs. "I already told you to take the tray," Michelle said through the door before he even knocked. "I did take it," he said. "I just brought you something else." She didn't respond. He opened the door, walked to her side table, placed the orange on it, and left without explanation. 1 hour later, he came back. The orange was peeled, every segment gone. He collected the peel, put it in his pocket, and then went downstairs without saying a word to anyone. But something in his chest felt like a door opening, just slightly, just enough. That night, the rain was still falling when something pulled Ethan out of sleep. He lay still in the dark, listening. There it was, faint, muffled by floors and walls and the steady voice of the rain outside, but unmistakable once you knew what you were hearing. She was crying. Not the loud releasing kind that brings relief when it's over. And this was the other kind. Quiet, exhausted, the sound of someone who had been crying for so long that even the crying itself was tired. The sound of a person who had sent everyone away and then discovered too late. That being alone with grief is not the same thing as being strong. Every instinct Ethan had told him to get up and go to her. He stayed where he was. He had learned this from years of watching his mother. There are moments when the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them have their pain privately. Michelle Adams had spent her whole life being seen as powerful. To take that from her, even in the name of comfort, would not be a kindness. So he lay in the dark and listened to the rain and pretended he couldn't hear anything else. But he did not go back to sleep. The discovery happened by accident. The next morning, Patricia sent him to the storage room at the end of the hall to fetch spare bed sheets. He found them easily enough, but as he pulled them from the shelf, his elbow caught the edge of a cardboard box beside them. It tilted and spilled part of its contents onto the floor. He crouched down to pick things up and stopped. Spread across the floor in front of him were framed magazine covers. 5 of them. 6 more still inside the box. City Business Review, The Executive, National Property Magazine, and Urban Development Today, and on every single cover, the same face, younger, sharper, standing in front of buildings and boardroom windows with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something real and knew it. Michael Adams before you picked them up one by one. The headlines were the kind that were meant to be framed and hung on walls. The woman reshaping the city's skyline. The developer who changes how we live, building the future. There were award plaques inside the box, too. Oh, a heavy glass trophy with her name engraved at the base, certificates in thick frames, and a loose photograph unframed, slightly bent at one corner of Michelle at what looked like a groundbreaking ceremony, hard hat on her head, shovel in her hands, laughing at something someone just off camera had said. He had never seen her laugh, not once. He put everything back carefully, picked up the sheets, and left. But he carried what he had seen with him for the rest of that day. And he thought about it while preparing her lunch. He thought about it while she snapped at Dennis over a 2-minute phone call. He thought about it while watching her sit by the window in the evening, perfectly still, looking at a city she used to move through like she owned it. And slowly, quietly, something became clear to him. She wasn't a difficult woman. She was a grieving one. Every sharp word, every thrown object, every impossible demand, it was armor. It was what happened when a person who had spent 40 years defining herself through strength suddenly found herself in a life where strength alone wasn't enough. Her anger was grief wearing the only costume it knew how to wear in a house like this. Ethan felt something settle inside him. Not pity, something more useful than pity. Understanding. The storm arrived that evening without much warning. The rain went from steady to furious in a matter of minutes. And then, with one enormous crack of thunder that seemed to shake the mansion from the ground up, every light in the house went out. Total darkness. Ethan was in the kitchen. He waited for the backup generator. It didn't come. And then, from upstairs, a sound that made him move before he had even decided to. A crash. And then a sound he had never once heard from Michael Adams. A sound she would never have made if she had any choice in the matter. Pure, unguarded fear. He took the stairs in the dark, bent his hand on the banister, moving fast. He knew these stairs well enough by now that his feet found each one without thinking. At the top, he turned toward her room and pushed the door open. The only light came from the storm-gray city below, just enough to see shapes. Michelle was by the window, her wheelchair caught at a bad angle against the bedside table, one wheel stuck. Her hands were on the wheels, pushing hard, but she wasn't going anywhere. She turned toward the sound of the door, and her face in the gray light was something Ethan had never seen before on her. Completely undefended. "It's me," he said immediately. "It's Ethan. I'm right here." He heard her exhale. He crossed the room carefully, found the table by touch, moved it, and freed the wheel. He didn't touch her. He just cleared the path. "Better," he said. "Yes," she said. The word was small. He found the emergency torch in her bedside drawer, and he had made a point on his first day of knowing where every emergency item was in every room and switched it on. Warm, steady light filled the space between them. Michelle blinked. She looked at him. Then she looked away and began pulling herself back together, piece by piece, the way you pick up something fragile that has fallen and check it for damage before setting it back in place. "I wasn't afraid," she said. "I know," Ethan said. "The chair got stuck." "I saw," he said. "It's sorted now." He pulled the armchair from the corner and placed it nearby, not too close, and sat down. The torch rested on the windowsill, pointed at the ceiling, filling the room with soft, even light. Outside, thunder rolled away into the distance. They sat in silence, not uncomfortable. Something different from anything that had existed in this room before. Then Michelle spoke. "Why haven't you left?" she said. Her voice was quiet. No performance in it, no sharpness. Just a real question from a real person sitting in the dark like the others. "Why haven't you left like the others?" Ethan looked at the rain on the glass. He thought about the question before he answered, not reaching for something clever or comforting, but something honest. "Because running doesn't fix what's broken," he said. The room went very still. She looked at him, and in the soft torchlight, her face was different from any version of it he had seen before. The mask wasn't there. No armor. No performance. Just a person tired, alone, real. She looked, Ethan thought, like the woman in the photograph, the one laughing with the hard hat on. "Most people," she said slowly, "find me too difficult to bother with." "Most people," Ethan said, "don't look past the difficult part." The storm outside had softened to a murmur. The city below glimmered through the wet glass, and the battlefield, for the first time, became something else entirely. A conversation. The days that followed were different. Not dramatically. Not the kind of change that announces itself with noise, but different the way air changes after a storm. Cleaner, clearer, with more room in it to breathe. Food trays came back empty. One morning, day 8, he brought her medication, and she said without looking up from her papers, Please leave the window open when you go. The air is good this morning, please. He left the window open. He went downstairs and stood in the kitchen with the empty tray in his hands. Patricia was watching him. What happened? She said, "Please," Ethan said. Patricia put down her crossword. They looked at each other in the kind of silence that means something. She stopped arguing when he helped her. No more pulled arms or redirected wheels or sharp corrections issued in the middle of a transfer. She began to allow assistance the way a person allows it when they have finally decided that needing help is not the same as being helpless. And she started asking about his family, though not as small talk. Michael Adams did not do small talk. She asked with the focused attention of someone who had spent her career listening carefully and understanding exactly what the answers meant. "Your sister Olivia," she said one afternoon. "What does she study?" "Business administration," Ethan said. "Is she good at it?" "Her professor says she has one of the sharpest analytical minds he's seen in 10 years, Ethan said. "She told me like it was nothing, like someone had complimented her shoes." Michael's mouth moved. "Not quite a smile, but in the direction of one confidence," she said quietly. "That's a useful thing for a young woman in business. She has plenty of it," Ethan said. "Boss, your mother sounds remarkable too," Michelle said. "She is," Ethan said. "She raised you alone?" "After my father died. I was 20. Ethan looked at the window. "She kept everything together. She still does, even when her body makes it harder." Michelle was quiet for a moment. "A woman who refuses to stop," she said softly. "Yes," Ethan said. "I understand that," she said. He looked at her. "I know you do," he said. It was on a quiet Tuesday evening, day 11, when everything that had been slowly rising to the surface finally broke through. Ethan was reading. Michelle had been looking at one of the framed magazine covers that had quietly appeared on her desk over the past few days, moved from the storage room without explanation. He hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't explained it. It was just there now, out in the open. "His name was Kevin," she said. Ethan lowered his book. She was looking at the magazine cover, not at him. "He was in the car with me," she said. "The night of the accident." Her voice was steady in the way that takes enormous effort. "He died before the ambulance arrived. I was unconscious. I didn't get to say anything to him." Ethan closed his book and said nothing. He gave her the space to continue. "We were supposed to get married the following April," she said. "The venue was already chosen. He had already given me the ring." She looked at her right hand, at the simple gold band Ethan had noticed before but never asked about. "I moved it to my right hand," she said quietly, "because I couldn't take it off. But wearing it on the left felt like pretending." She finally looked at Ethan. Her eyes were dry, but only through the kind of effort that comes from having cried so much in private that the daytime tears had all been used up. "Everyone tells me I'm lucky to be alive," she said. "My doctors, the people who send flowers." Her voice stayed perfectly even. "I know I'm supposed to agree. I know that's the right thing to feel." She paused. "But there are mornings when I look at this chair, and I think he is gone, and I cannot even walk to the window by myself. And I think that you should have been the one who didn't survive," Ethan said. She looked at him sharply, not with anger, with something far more fragile than anger. "Yes," she whispered. Ethan sat forward. "That's not true," he said. "Not quickly, not harshly, just clearly the way you say something you are completely certain of. You don't know that." "I know that Kevin didn't choose what happened," Ethan said. "And I know that if it had been the other way around, if he had survived and you hadn't, you would not want him spending every day believing he was the one who deserved to live." Michael looked away. "That's different," she said. "It's exactly the same," Ethan said gently. The room held the silence carefully. "I'm afraid," she said finally. so quietly he almost missed it beneath the sound of the city below. "Of what?" Ethan asked. "Of being seen," she said, "like this." She looked at the wheelchair. "Before I walked into every room first, I controlled how people saw me. Now I roll in and the first thing everyone sees is this. And I watch their faces change. I watch them recalculate who I am based on what I can no longer do." Her voice tightened. "I cannot stand being someone's inspiration story. I cannot stand the careful voices and the head tilts and the pity dressed up as admiration." "I know," Ethan said. She looked at him. "I have never once tilted my head at you," he said. Something crossed her face. Unexpected, brief, almost a laugh. But gone almost before it arrived. "No," she said. "You haven't. Being paralyzed isn't what frightens you most," Ethan said. "You just told me yourself. It's being seen as weak." "Yes," she said. "That's exactly it." "But you've let me see you," Ethan said quietly. "Every single day for 11 days. You've let me help with the things you can't do alone, and you're still here. You haven't disappeared. You haven't become less." He paused. "And I have never, not for one day, thought you were weak." Michelle Adams looked at Ethan Carter for a long, quiet moment. Then she looked back at the magazine cover on her desk. The woman in the sharp suit, standing in front of a building that hadn't existed until she imagined it. "I used to be her," she said softly. "You still are," Ethan said, "just sitting down." The room was very warm and very quiet, and for the first time since Ethan had arrived at the Adams mansion, Michelle did not reach for her armor. She just sat with the truth of what he had said and let it stay. The change in Michelle didn't happen all at once. It came the way morning comes, gradually, almost without you noticing, until suddenly there was enough light to see clearly by. She stopped throwing things. She began saying please and thank you, without it costing her a visible effort. She allowed Ethan to help her without turning every moment of assistance into a small battle. The mansion, which had felt for so long like a place people survived rather than lived in, began to breathe a little easier. Ellen noticed. She didn't say much about it, just moved around the kitchen with slightly lighter footsteps and hummed quietly to herself sometimes, which Ethan had come to understand was her version of celebration. Even Dennis, who still approached Michelle's room with the careful energy of someone diffusing something, and had started to linger a few seconds longer in conversations before making his escape. Things were better. Not perfect, not simple, but better. It was during one of these better days, a calm Thursday afternoon, that Michelle discovered Ethan's secret. She hadn't been trying to. She had simply pressed the bell because she needed her afternoon medication. And Ethan hadn't come as quickly as usual, which was unusual enough that after 5 minutes, she wheeled herself to her doorway and looked down the hall. He was at the far end near the window that overlooked the side garden. His back was to her. He had his phone pressed between his ear and his shoulder, and in his hands, she had to look twice to be sure, was a small insulin pen, the kind she recognized immediately because her own doctor had once explained the equipment used for her medication adjustments. Ethan was talking in a low voice. "Patient, come hold it steady, Mom. Pinch the skin just like I showed you. Good. Now, press. Yes, just like that. Perfect. You did it perfectly." A pause as he listened. "No, it didn't look wrong. You did it right, I promise." Another pause. "Yes, I'll call again tonight. Eat something first. Love you." He hung up. He stood there a moment looking out at the garden. Then he put the insulin pen carefully back into a small case in his pocket. The kind of small practiced motion that comes from doing something so many times it becomes automatic, and turned around. He saw her in the doorway. For just a second, a single brief second, something moved across his face. Not embarrassment, not guilt, just the look of a person who has been carrying something privately and has been unexpectedly seen. Then it was gone. His face was calm again. "I'm sorry," he said, walking toward her. "I didn't hear the bell. Let me get your medication." "Hey, Ethan," she said. He stopped. "How long has she been unable to do it herself?" Michelle asked. "Boss, her hands shake now," he said. "It started about 6 months ago. On bad days, she can manage. On other days, he stopped. I walk her through it over the phone when I'm not there." Michelle looked at him. "Every day, twice a day," he said simply. She was quiet for a moment. "And before you came here, when you were doing delivery work, you did this then too?" "Yes, ma'am." Pulled over on the side of the road. "And sometimes," he said, "sometimes in a car park. Once outside a shopping center." He said it without drama, without any invitation for sympathy, just facts, stated plainly the way he stated everything. Mikkel looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned her wheelchair and went back into her room. "Bring my medication when you're ready," she said quietly. She didn't bring it up again that day. But Ethan noticed because he noticed everything that she watched him differently after that. And not with pity. Michelle Adams didn't do pity, either giving or receiving. It was more like someone who had been looking at a painting from across the room and had finally walked close enough to see what it was actually made of. The second discovery came 3 days later, and this time it was Patricia who told her. Ethan didn't know this until afterward. That he had been in the therapy room preparing for Michelle's morning stretches when Patricia in the kitchen had answered a phone call from the motorcycle repair shop asking if anyone would be collecting the red and silver bike that had been left as a deposit payment for a medical equipment invoice. Patricia, confused, had asked questions. And later that morning, when Ethan came to collect the breakfast tray, Michelle looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. "Like you sold your motorcycle," she said. Ethan set the tray down. "Patricia talks when she's nervous," he said. "She also talks when she's sad," Michelle said. "Sit down, Ethan. You sat. That motorcycle," she said carefully. "That was how you did your delivery work." "I have the van," he said. "The van that needs new brakes every 3 months," she said. "The one that cost you money you don't have." She paused. "You sold the motorcycle for your mother's medical bills. It wasn't a question." "Yeah, it made sense at the time," Ethan said, when for months ago Michelle looked at the window. Outside, the garden was bright and ordinary in the morning sun. When she turned back, something in her face had shifted, rearranged itself around a new understanding. "You came to this house," she said slowly, "to earn money to replace what you lost taking care of your mother. And every day you've been here, you've still been taking care of her twice a day over the phone." She paused. While I was shouting at you." "You had your own things to deal with," Ethan said. "Don't do that," she said sharply, not with cruelty, but with the directness of someone who had heard enough polite deflection to last a lifetime. "Don't make excuses for me. I was horrible to you." Ethan looked at her steadily. "You were hurting," he said. "So were you," she said. "You were hurting too. And you never once showed it. Not once." She shook her head slowly. "I thought strength looked like what I had before. The company, the buildings, the magazine covers, the ability to walk into a room and command it." She paused. "But that's not—" She stopped. "That's not what strength is," Ethan offered quietly. "No," she said. "It isn't." She looked at her hands in her lap. "What you do, carrying what you carry without making it anyone else's burden. That's something I don't think I've ever managed." Even before the accident, Ethan said nothing. And he let the words settle where they needed to. "You should have told me," she said finally. "About your mother, about the motorcycle." "It wasn't your problem to carry," Ethan said. "No," Michelle said quietly. "But it would have been good for me to know." She looked at him. "It would have been good for me to be reminded that I'm not the only person in this house with a war going on." The room was very still. "We're both just trying to hold things together," Ethan said. "Yes," Michelle said. "We are." And the envelope arrived on a Monday. It came with a regular post handled by Dennis, who placed it on Michelle's desk with the rest of her correspondence. It was thick, cream-colored with an embossed logo in the top left corner. The National Real Estate Development Summit. Michelle opened it while Ethan was helping her with her morning routine. She read it once. Then she folded it, put it back in the envelope, and placed it face down on the desk. She didn't mention it. Ethan noticed. And he noticed the way she glanced at the envelope twice more during the morning and then deliberately looked away from it. He noticed how she was quieter than usual at lunch, and how she spent the afternoon staring out the window at the city with a particular expression she wore when something was fighting for space inside her head. You said nothing. He waited. He had learned that with Michelle, waiting was often the most powerful thing he could do. It was 2 days later when she finally spoke about it. She picked up the envelope from the desk and held it toward him without a word. He took it, opened it, and read. It was an invitation, a keynote address, the biggest real estate summit in the state, the kind of event that shaped the industry's direction for the following year. The theme was rebuilding, urban spaces, community development. Exactly. The world Michelle Adams had spent 12 years building her life inside. They wanted her to open it. So Ethan looked up from the letter. Michelle was watching him with her arms folded, the defensive posture he hadn't seen much of lately. "No," she said before he could speak. "I didn't say anything," Ethan said. "You were going to." "I was going to ask when it is," he said. 3 weeks, she said. "And the answer is no. I'm not going." "Why?" he asked. She looked at him as if the answer was so obvious it barely deserved a response. "Because I would have to go in this," she said, gesturing at the wheelchair in front of every person in that industry who knew me before, every journalist, every competitor, every person who has been wondering for 4 months what happened to Michael Adams. She shook her head. "I will not give them that picture." "What picture?" Ethan said. "The wheelchair," she said. "The helpless woman in the wheelchair. That becomes the headline. That becomes the only thing anyone talks about." Ethan set the letter down on the desk. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully, not because he was afraid of her, but because this mattered too much to get wrong. "Miss Adams," he said, "your legs stopped working." She looked at him. "Your voice didn't," he said. The room was silent. Michelle stared at him. Her jaw was tight. Her hands gripped the armrest of her wheelchair the way they used to in the early days, knuckles whitening the physical expression of something fighting to stay controlled. "It's not that simple," she said. "I know it isn't," Ethan said. "I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying your voice still works. The rest is fear. And fear I understand, but I don't think you should let it win. Not this one." She turned away sharply. "You can go," she said. "I've heard enough." Ethan picked up the empty tray from her desk. "The invitation will be on your desk," he said calmly, "in case you want to look at it again." He left the room. She didn't speak about the summit for 4 days, but she didn't throw the envelope away. Ethan watched it sit on her desk, sometimes moved slightly, sometimes turned over, once folded and placed in the drawer, and then retrieved again the following morning. He watched her look at it when she thought no one was paying attention. He watched her pick it up and put it down. Pick it up and put it down. You said nothing. On the 5th day, he came in with her morning medication and found her sitting at the desk with the invitation open in front of her. She was reading it carefully, the way she read contracts, slowly taking in every word, her pen resting in her fingers, even though she wasn't writing anything. She looked up when he came in. "If I went," she said, and the words were slow and deliberate, like someone stepping onto uncertain ground and testing each step before putting their full weight down. "I would need someone with me, someone I trust." Ethan set the medication tray down. "I know," he said. I'm not asking you to push my wheelchair around a conference center like I'm luggage," she said immediately. I can manage the chair myself. I would need, she stopped, tried again. I would need someone nearby, someone who, another stop, someone who doesn't tilt their head, Ethan said. She looked at him, and this time the almost smile made it all the way. Yes, she said. Exactly that. Ethan nodded once. Then I'll be there, he said. Michelle looked back at the invitation. She picked up the pen and, for the first time in 4 months, Michael Adams wrote a reply to the outside world. The morning of the summit, Michael was up before Ethan. When he knocked on her door at 6:30, she was already dressed. She had chosen carefully a deep navy blazer, sharp and structured, the kind she used to wear to board meetings. Her hair was pulled back cleanly. The gold ring was on her right hand where it always was. She sat in her wheelchair with her back straight and her chin level. And when Ethan came through the door, she looked at him with an expression that was 1 part determination and 2 parts barely controlled terror. "You look like yourself," Ethan said. She exhaled slowly. "I feel like I'm about to walk into a fire." "I know," he said. "Are you ready anyway?" She looked at the invitation on her desk, the one she had replied to 5 days ago, the one that had started all of this. Then she looked at Ethan. "Let's go," she said. The conference center was a tall glass building in the heart of the city, the kind of building Ethan noticed that looked a little like something Michelle might have designed. Wide entrance, good light spaces that felt considered rather than accidental. The car park was already filling when they arrived. Dennis had driven them, and he pulled as close to the entrance as possible without being asked. Ethan got out first, opened the door, and stood back while Michelle managed her own exit from the car the way she always did now, with quiet efficiency, not asking for help unless she needed it and asking clearly when she did. As they moved toward the entrance, people began to notice, not loudly, not rudely, but Ethan watched it happen. The small double takes, the whispered conversations, or the careful way people arranged their faces into expressions of welcome, while their eyes adjusted to the reality of Michael Adams in a wheelchair for the first time. You watched her notice it too. He watched her decide to keep moving. Anyway, he stayed 2 steps behind her, close enough to be present, far enough to give her the room to arrive on her own terms. Inside, an organizer rushed forward with a clipboard and a bright, careful smile. "Miss Adams, welcome back. It's so wonderful to have you here." The voice was warm but slightly too soft. The words chosen with slightly too much care. Michelle looked at the woman directly. "Thank you," she said with the full, firm voice of someone who had run boardrooms and broken ground on buildings and was not here to be handled gently. "Let's talk about the stage setup." The organizer blinked. Then she straightened slightly and her smile became more genuine. "Of course, right this way." Ethan watched Michelle move through the lobby. He saw something happening to her as she went, a slow returning like a light being turned up gradually on a dimmer switch. This was her world. She knew how to move in it. She knew how to read rooms and people and the particular energy of an industry gathering where everyone was watching everyone else. She had never actually lost that. She had only forgotten she still had it. The main hall held 500 people, and Ethan stood at the side of the stage as the room filled. Architects, developers, investors, city planners, journalists. The air had the particular charged quality of a room full of people who were good at their work and knew it. A moderator took the stage first and spoke for a few minutes about the theme of the summit. Rebuilding. The word kept returning. Rebuilding cities, rebuilding communities, rebuilding after disruption. Then she said Michelle's name. And the room applauded warmly immediately, the way a room applauded someone it has genuinely missed. Ethan watched from the side as Michelle moved toward the ramp that led to the stage. She had been shown it earlier during the setup check, a wide, gently sloped ramp that the venue had installed without being asked, which had made something briefly move across her face when she first saw it. She wheeled herself up the ramp and onto the stage. The applause began to fade as she appeared. Not from coldness, but from the particular silence that falls over a room when something real is happening. 500 people went quiet. Michelle stopped at the center of the stage. She looked out at the room, at the faces. Some she knew, some she recognized, some completely new, at the journalists with their cameras, at the rows and rows of people from the world she had built her life inside. She took a breath and she spoke. The last time I stood on a stage, she said, I was standing. The room stayed completely still. 4 months ago, a car accident took my fiancé and took the use of my legs. And for a very long time after that, she paused. Not from weakness, from the intention of someone choosing exactly the right words. I confused, losing my ability to walk with losing myself. I thought they were the same thing. They are not. Ethan watched from the side of the stage. He watched 500 people lean almost imperceptibly forward. I spent 12 years building things, Michelle said. Buildings, companies, communities. I believe that what I was building was a legacy. I now think what I was actually building without knowing it was a wall between myself and anyone who might see me as anything less than completely in control. She paused. The accident knocked that wall down, and I was furious about it. I want to be honest with you about that. I was furious and I was broken, and I was not kind to the people around me. She let that sit. But something happened during those 4 months. A man came to my door, not a therapist, not a life coach, a delivery driver who needed a job and was honest enough to say so. She looked toward the side of the stage toward Ethan. He didn't treat me like a patient. He didn't tilt his head at me. He didn't speak to me in the careful voice people use when they think you might shatter. She paused. He just showed up every day and refused to leave. The room was absolutely silent. He taught me something that 12 years of building things never did, she said. He taught me that strength isn't standing tall. She straightened in her chair, her voice clear and steady and completely her own. Strength is standing again in a different way. For 1 second, the room held the silence. Then someone began to clap, and within 3 seconds, 500 people were on their feet. The applause was the kind that fills a room completely. Not polite, not performed, but the real kind. The involuntary kind. The kind that happens when people recognize something true and their hands move before their minds have even finished processing it. Ethan stood at the side of the stage. He did not clap, he just watched, and Michelle Adams, who had not smiled in front of another person in 4 months, smiled. Not the forced, managed smile she used in photographs. The real one. The kind that reached her eyes and stayed there. Things moved differently after that day. Back at the mansion, changes came quietly but steadily, the way real changes always come. The staff moved through the house without the careful, fearful energy that had defined them for months. New caregivers were brought in, long-term ones, and Michelle treated them with a directness that was still demanding, but no longer cruel. She told them clearly what she needed, listened when they spoke, and thanked them when they did something right. It was not softness exactly, it was respect. And in a house that had gone so long without it, respect felt like sunlight. The awards came out of the storage room. The magazine covers went back on the walls. Not all of them, not in every room, but enough. Enough to say, this happened, and it was real. And I am still the person who did these things. She launched a foundation. It happened faster than anyone expected because when Michelle Adams decided to do something, the pace tended to surprise people. The foundation focused on mobility rehabilitation, funding equipment, therapy, and support for people who had lost physical function and couldn't afford the help they needed. She named it simply, No Fanfare. She said the work was the point, not the name. Patricia cried when she heard about it. She cried in the kitchen with her crossword face down on the table and didn't apologize for it. And Michelle, when Patricia told her she was crying, said nothing dismissive. She just handed her a tissue, and that too was new. Ethan was packing his bag on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the summit, when Michelle asked him to come to the study. He found her at her desk with a folder open in front of her. She gestured to the chair across from her, the same chair he had sat in on the night of the storm, and he sat down. She opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the desk. He looked at it. It was a receipt, a payment confirmation from the hospital and the pharmacy that handled his mother's care. A full settlement of every outstanding medical bill cleared completely. His mother's ongoing medication costs covered for the next 2 years. Ethan looked at the paper for a long time. "Miss Adams, there's another one," she said. She slid a second document across. It was a scholarship confirmation, full tuition coverage for a business administration degree in the name of Olivia Carter. Ethan sat very still. "I can't accept this," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. "This is too much. I didn't come here for this. I know you didn't," Michelle said. "That's precisely why I'm giving it to you. It feels like charity," he said. Michelle leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you what it actually is," she said. "Your mother will have her medication because her son is the reason I got out of this house and back into my life. But your sister will finish her degree because she deserves to, and because I have the means to make it possible, and because doing nothing with that ability would be wasteful." She paused. "And I need someone to run community outreach for the foundation. Someone who understands what it means to need help and not be able to afford it. Someone the community will actually trust." She looked at him steadily. "I want that to be you." Ethan looked at the documents on the desk. As he thought about his mother walking him through the insulin pen over the phone, he thought about the motorcycle he had sold. He thought about Olivia at her fold-up table doing homework at midnight. "I'm a delivery driver," he said. "You're the person who walked into the most difficult room in this city," Michelle said, and stayed until it became somewhere worth staying. She paused. "That's the only qualification that matters for this job." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. It's not charity," she said. "It's partnership." He looked at her, at the woman who had thrown a glass at a caregiver on her first day, at the woman who had cried alone in the dark for months, at the woman who had wheeled herself onto a stage in front of 500 people and told them the truth about who she was now. "Okay," he said. Michelle nodded once, the way she nodded when something was decided and she was satisfied with the decision. She closed the folder. "You start Monday," she said. A week later, Ethan was in the therapy room when he heard movement in the hall. He stepped out and stopped. At the far end of the corridor, Michelle was in her assisted standing frame, a piece of rehabilitation equipment her physiotherapist had introduced 2 weeks earlier. It was slow work, the therapist had explained. Difficult, some days better than others. Today, her therapist was beside her, hands ready but not touching, and Michelle was standing. Not easily, not without effort. Her arms held the frame, her body working hard, her face set with concentration, but she was upright. Her feet were on the floor. She was standing. Ethan stayed where he was. He did not move closer. He did not speak. He simply stood at the end of the hall and watched. The way you watch something that doesn't need you to do anything except witness it. After a long moment, Michelle lifted her eyes and saw him there. She didn't say anything loudly, didn't announce it. She just looked at him and her lips moved almost to herself in the quiet of the hallway. "I'm not broken." Ethan heard it. He nodded once, slowly, the way you confirmed something that was always true. She held the frame. She stayed upright. The morning light came through the tall window at the end of the hall and fell across the marble floor in a long, clean line. And the mansion that had once been ruled by silence and anger and grief That house where 23 caregivers had walked out and no one had stayed held something different now. It held purpose. It held two people who had each been carrying their own quiet war, who had met in the hardest possible way, and who had, without either of them planning it, made each other stronger. Because that is what happens sometimes in the most unexpected places between the most unlikely people. Strength finds strength and refuses to let go. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.